Cartoon Network, despite its extremely turbulent history, has been home to many of animation's most innovative gems. From the extremely creative anime-inspired energy of Dexter's Laboratory, to the more dramatic horror-heavy lean in Courage the Cowardly Dog, and even some more modern hits like Regular Show essentially bringing stoner comedy to kids, and all the strides Steven Universe made for inclusivity in the medium. There's certainly been some big bumps in the road, but in many ways, Western animation would not be even remotely the same without their studio's history of talent and commitment. However, as groundbreaking Infinity Train, OKKO, and the like have been to the field, there's also a wholesome, lighthearted side that doesn't seem to get the same love. Of course, this isn't entirely true. Craig of the Creek eventually managed to get the following it wholly deserved, but you will barely hear anyone talking about the Fungies or Tig and Seek. There are other reasons for this being the case, but the point is there's a good number of gems from the late 2010s and early 2020s that got slept on big time, and probably the most overlooked of these is Summer Camp Island. Let's get started by covering the series creator, British artist Julia Pott. Her bread and butter has mainly been independent works scattered online, particularly of the deep and thoughtful variety. The first of these to be public was her Kingston graduation film, 2007's My First Crush.
And I'd have to remember everything that he'd said to me, and everything I'd said to him, and how many times he kissed me, and where he touched me.
She then followed this up with several more works of similar caliber, such as The Event and Belly.
On the day before the first day, we fell into geometry like children. We slept, alone and restlessly, through the shipping muse.
Yes, this is the content we need to show our children. But after moving stateside, Pott, unsure of where to go from there, was convinced by a friend to try pitching a show of her own to a network, describing the experience as a bunch of short films in succession with the same cast of characters. So the pilot for her new concept, Summer Camp Island, was made as part of the shorts program Cartoon Network Studios was hosting at the time, and spent 2 years in development before premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2016. And it must have been a big success there, as CN greenlit the concept to a full series in January 2017. During that 2-year development period, however, Julia picked up some studio experience by working on Adventure Time, most notably helping with the story of the Elements miniseries. It was these connections, and the show being picked up right around the time the AT team wrapped up their work, that got a lot of people from that show carried over to her show, which even Pott admits was hugely lucky of her. Unlike those other 2 shows I mentioned, SCI did begin life well before HBO Max ever entered the picture, and ran its full first season on Cartoon Network proper, albeit in one of the weirdest manners I've seen. See, the entire first half of the season, 20 episodes worth, aired on a single marathon weekend in July 2018, because this was when the network was trying desperately to keep up with the streaming age. And then the second 20 was dispersed across 4 weeks the next year, and I sure don't recall it getting much in the way of reruns, so in hindsight, it's little wonder why this didn't seem to catch on all that much. But enough about all that for now. Most of you are probably turning on this video asking, what exactly did go on in this show? How did something like this sustain 6 seasons when so many others got stuck with 4, 3, or even 2? What was I missing out on all these years? Well, these are all questions I am aiming to answer as I give this gem the retrospective I think it deserves. The premise of the series is pretty straightforward on the surface. It takes place in this remote summer camp that, unknown to the outside world, is full of magic. The counselors are real witches, it's inhabited by all these mythical creatures, and nearly every object is sentient. Ow! In all this, we follow 2 campers in particular, this elephant kid named Oscar, and her hedgehog best friend named Hedgehog, as they explore all over the island, have adventures with their campmates, and slowly discover that there may be more than meets the eye. But most of what they get up to involves confronting the head counselor and self-centered bitch, Susie.
I think you'll find that I just cleaned it. Mom.
What did you just call me?
Right off the bat, the fact that this shares a lot of the key staff from Adventure Time should give you a good general idea on what to expect from the writing here. It's for the most part really chill and low-key, with the constant surrealness only adding charm to the world they've created thanks to how casually it's portrayed. It's the type of fantasy that doesn't expect you to think all that hard about the setting and the implications behind its rules, and just kinda go along with the flow alongside the characters. It's a fine line to ride that I think the show succeeds greatly at.
How do I check my voice? Excuse me. I love Mom. Watch me, Hedgehog. I love Mom.
It's very easy to dismiss this show as it's funny because it's random sort of cartoon, which I imagine turned away many who are not into that. But I really don't think that's a fair assessment once you look at what actually goes into the series' world building and humor. Yes, it does get a lot of comedic mileage out of the surrealness, as I'll detail in a bit, but most of what they establish about the world functions as its own bizarre logic that it consistently follows, and when it is played for laughs, it's usually in regard to how the character reacts to it, either through encounters in the moment, or just treating them like a casual everyday sight.
So then I said, ball is in your court, Jeremy.
Good one.
In reality, a great portion of the humor comes from just witty character dialogue, and even most of that is so inherently baked into the personalities themselves that it comes quite naturally and never feels try-hard.
This is your project? Banana question mark?
Yeah, and get this. It totally is.
This vibe is greatly enhanced by how it's visually and audibly brought to life. The look of the characters can admittedly be an acquired taste for some, especially with the bulgy eyes, simple shapes, and even some animal features looking a little artistic licensed. But I was able to get used to it after seeing them in motion for a little while, and I enjoy how down-to-earth everyone moves despite the magical setting. It adds a lot to the aforementioned contrast.
Yeah, like even though they're like animals and there's magic, I want it to be like everyone feels really real.
What really brings it home to me, though, are the backgrounds and color work. There's a consistently soft palette, heavy on the pinks and light blues and browns, along with a lot of immersive yet cozily simplistic detail in the environments, giving the show a distinct storybook feel, which I could tell Pot was going for just from going off the stuff she draws in her free time. It helps that the background music mostly consists of ambient tracks that only further add to the warm and fuzzy feel of it all, while still willing to mix things up whenever the current situation calls for it.
But only I would follow you toward the dimensions.
And, much like Adventure Time, it's frequently willing to let the music take a break and let the characters breathe, making it seem all the more personable.
I'm sorry about your nose.
Nah, it's starting to grow on me. I'm thinking maybe I'll keep it.
No, your first nose was cuter.
There's even some subtle touches they pull outside the actual episodes. There's actually 2 different vocal tracks used alternatively for the opening.
Magic is real here, far away from home. Magic is real here, far away from home.
And for the closing, there's a nice bouncy track for the lighthearted romps, while any that hint at something greater get something more dramatic and mysterious. Always a fan of window dressing like that. The fact virtually everything is alive on the island is another memorable constant of the series. Even when they aren't doing anything, you still always see stuff like clouds and walls have faces in the background, which is some impressive, if kinda unsettling, attention to detail. But when we do see them in action, sometimes their presence is a simple Flintstone-style joke.
You're sleeping through me. You're sleeping through me.
Huh?
Other times they're full-on characters that actively drive entire plots. Like, you have this basketball who allows Oscar to become a sports star, only to desperately cling onto his companionship right into stalker territory.
Maybe you don't want to be best friends with basketball. And maybe basketball don't want to go to the hoop anymore. No, please!
The freaking Moon, who by the way is voiced by Cedric the Entertainer, gets some good sass in every now and then.
It's almost bedtime. For you, I mean. For me, it's Monday morning.
You have the fabled monster under the bed, which we find out in one episode there's this whole society of them that treats Hedgehog like a goddess or something.
It's her grossest, most personal work since the snotty tissues. No. I'm going to auction it tonight at Hedgehoggaby's.
Yeah, we'll talk about the stories a little later. And of course, there's Oscar's own set of pajamas, who is super precious and must be protected at all costs.
Can you do a spell on me? So my heart turns to ice and Oscar becomes like a stranger to me so I don't miss him when he leaves me all alone?
It's actually kinda insane just how committed they became to making a personality out of any single object they can think of, no matter how big or small their role is.
Brush, brush, brush your upper molars. Brush, 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 that's where you got that cavity.
But getting into the characters, Oscar and Hedgehog are just the right leads. Two very different kinds of audience vessels to guide us through all the different antics that go on. Oscar is a very sensitive and kind-hearted sort, but not particularly creative nor confident, to the point where he's very dependent on Hedgehog to really get by. A lot of the conflicts are either kickstarted or escalated by him in some form.
Please be really careful with my sandwich on the table there.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
I wouldn't call him absent-minded, at least not in the sense many would define that, but he does tend to be forgettable and not have much in the realm of social skills.
I do better in small groups of 2 or less.
He always means well and wants to act in the best interest of everyone around him, even when he acts irrationally in the process.
How long do you plan on doing this? For the rest of the night, for the rest of my life!
I lose!
Just seems so happy.
I'm so happy!
He really is a naive kid at the end of the day, and everything he goes through is ultimately meant to slowly better him as a person. Hedgehog, by contrast, is the much more active player of the two, especially in mind. She's really curious, has a strong background in science, and a particular interest in learning magic, so naturally, she's going to be the main story vessel.
Ooh, a map of the island from 1895.
And I like that she is able to do so while still clearly having that childhood innocence to her, having fun with her campmates, gaining a little crush in the process.
Pointy ears, he's a bat. Backwards cap, these are facts. My heart is full to the max.
And despite her also being rather cheery most of the time, she is able to show much more attitude than one would think, often either directly calling out Susie, or just letting out her repressed feelings in interesting ways.
Crab bucket! Crab bucket!
What's interesting is exactly how their dynamic changed in development. In the pilot, Oscar pretty clearly had a crush on Hedgehog.
You love Hedgehog. Everybody knows it's true. Whenever she's around, your heart starts to pound. What are you gonna do?
But not long after, the team and Pot realize that the way they support and complement each other hits much harder as a platonic relationship. This is a move that I so greatly respect, because not only is it surprisingly rare to see such a strong non-romantic bond be depicted like this, but it makes the way they bounce off each other feel that much more genuine and close to reality. Very often, Oscar will say things about Hedgehog that, in any other show, would very much come across as romantic crushing.
I'll help you clean your room, Oscar. Oh, thank gosh, you're my best friend. I can search for 1,000 years and never find another person like you.
And if he was crushing, his actions would frankly start to look very creepy on his end.
Yeah, I always follow Hedgehog. How do you think I get to breakfast every Oh my gosh!
But as is, he just constantly wants his best friend by his side so they can bring out the best in each other. And I think many of us feel close to one particular person like this. Of course, Susie is the one character everyone who's even vaguely familiar with the show will remember, which makes sense. She easily carries the biggest presence every time she appears.
Don't come crying to me with your dumb baby problems, because I am not your mum. I'm the prettiest girl that ever talked to you.
She's rude, she's self-centered, she's gross sometimes. She's a cold soul who takes pride in getting to call the shots and keep the babies in their place.
I'll be up for another hour because I'm the camp counselor, but you have to go to bed now because you're babies.
But despite how she's the type of counselor that you never want to have in real life, there's such a charisma to how she's written and performed that always makes her constantly enjoyable to watch. Every other line she says is so quotable.
Oh, Pepper, did your mummy tell you were good at that?
Yeah?
Every mother lies. What's going on out there? Well, Too slow. I lost interest.
And I think a lot of that comes from how she's voiced by Julia Pott herself. I always think creators voicing main characters in their work just always has a sort of special authenticity to it. And that very much applies with Susie. I can't imagine anyone playing this part except Pott.
I play her, and it's very cathartic. Yeah, I get to be as mean as I like. Writing for her is really fun. You get to say all the things that you've sort of always wanted to say, but never
would.
Yeah, never would.
The show also has a habit of throwing guest voices in places that feel so random and unexpected at the moment, but they end up adding so much to the character they're voicing. Like the first episode alone has Richard Kind as this therapeutic pool shark, and his articulate, upbeat way of speaking is able to balance the calming yet still comedic tone of his quite well.
I think what you're experiencing is newness, not the strangeness of the world. You'd feel this way anywhere you went.
You also have Whoopi Goldberg as this head elf named Barb, who always likes to take her own approach to life and will show sass when argued with. This too proves a perfect fit.
Oscar, could you come down here for a minute? Sorry, you had a mosquito on your face.
Then there's this Yeti that the kids befriend named Saxophone, and though he usually only speaks in like an instrument voice, when they can understand him, he's freaking Elijah Wood.
I'm a teen Yeti, and I have different views than my family. They just spend all day rolling around in laundry.
There are many other characters across the show worth mentioning, of course, like the other witches Betsy and Alice, Puddles and the Alien King, the Ghost Boy, Ava, Howard, the other monsters, the campmates like Max, Lucy, and Pepper. But if I went in full depth with the whole cast, we'd be here all day and this video would never get finished. So let's move on to actually covering what kind of stories we get here. So, being such a relaxed series, most of the episodes in Season 1 feel very flavor of the week. You have a talent show episode, a video game brought to life episode, a time travel episode, a convention episode, a mommy problems episode, a trade mania episode, a freaking high school prom episode. They did basically everything you can think of. The series is constantly tossing new ideas at you with how assorted these episodes are, but it never feels overwhelming because they always spend just as much time on a particular setup as you'd want before they move on to something different. And thanks to the high episode count, it comes across more like they're taking as much advantage of the setting as they can. And no matter how archetypal some of these episodes can get, they're always executed in such a lighthearted, likable way thanks to the show's unique flavor and tone. You've heard these stories before, but you've never heard them told in this way, so you don't mind really.
It's a token of thanks, for you truly know how to treat your guests like royalty.
But to those of you who beg to have lore in these shows, rest assured, this island has some of that too. But just hints of lore for now. This mostly occurs in episodes like Fuzzy Pink Time Babies, where Oscar and Hedgehog put themselves in frozen time so they can stay together when Hedgehog's father prepares to take her off the island for business class. Only to find this mysterious old, yet really kind witch named Ramona.
There you are! Big Baby will take you to the beach.
And we find out that she has some kind of relationship with Susie, and that they've both been working on Earth longer than they look.
How long has Susie been 15?
It's a mystery.
And there's a few more instances where they throw in some lore when you aren't expecting it. Like this episode where Oscar is recording a video about his time at camp for his parents. But the monsters, who run the island's postal service, refuse to send it because it's the only remaining place in the world with magic, and therefore shouldn't be exposed.
If any adults find out we're here...
You'd be in danger?
Yeah, the whole island would be in danger.
I had no idea.
Then you have the episodes that simply prove impressively high concept. One of the most memorable to me is one where Hedgehog, at a full moon festival, gets turned into a werewolf, or werehog. and in this feral form, she's wreaking havoc all over the camp, so naturally, everyone gets scared of her, and she and Oscar try to find some way to reverse this. Okay, pretty standard stuff so far. But then the moon takes them to the Werewolf's Moon Festival.
The real one. The witches way over-commercialized it.
Where they encounter the werewolf queen, who shows Hedgehog the benefits of her new form.
Being a werewolf increases your senses tenfold, letting you perceive lights and colors that you couldn't before.
She even gets some advice on how to help control some of her primal instincts. So by the end, she decides that instead of running away from it, she's gotta both control it and embrace it.
Looks like being a werewolf is just part of me now.
It's such a fascinating subversion for this kind of story, and turns what started as a standard monster tale into a pretty thought-provoking metaphor for puberty. I really do admire them for taking this direction, and there's surprisingly enough sticks for the rest of the show.
Good night, Werehog. Hello, Hedgehog.
There's another where everyone is making paintings that the full moon brings to life in a way that allows everyone to walk in and fully immerse in these worlds, Mario 64 style. Everyone else is making these really adventurous, unique paintings, while Oscar only makes a quiet little meadow with flowers and puppies that everyone thinks is boring.
Maybe I meant more things going on emotionally? What do you mean? It's an emotional roller coaster!
Only to find the intents are completely tiring them out before long, which is when they come to appreciate the simpler, more peaceful stuff. It's honestly a solid metaphor just for the appeal of shows like this and other lighthearted stuff over your Infinity Trains and Steven universes.
Hey guys, check out my painting!
That's not real art. It's too cute. I'm here to see art that matters. Abstract, disorienting, depressing art. Art like Lucy's.
Those shows are much more ambitious for sure, and can really grip you in both dramatically and emotionally.
So many unresolved emotions.
But after a while, people will want to take it easy. And just because something isn't challenging the audience as much, doesn't mean it's of lesser value necessarily.
I guess it's more than that. It's so pure. But more importantly, it makes me feel good.
Poignant stuff indeed. Probably one of the most fascinating though, is the episode Midnight Quittance. Oscar and Hedgehog are invited to Ramona's annual feast for the time god that allows all time to move forward as nature intended. Right off the bat, we get met with some fantastic, somewhat philosophical ideas when we get told about the Tome of Time, and exactly how Ramona functions in frozen time.
She's just in between the seconds of the clock.
But when the actual quittance happens, with Oscar being the screw-up he is, he ends up pissing off this all-powerful being, causing their entire lives to flash by in these super quick sporadic cuts, all while he's trying to figure out how he can fix the mess. The art direction and layout for this episode must have been absolutely insane with how they had to come up with a completely new image every 2 seconds or so.
Bingo! The Spanakopita!
It's, in my opinion, the perfect example on how such a seemingly simple show like this can become something more layered without at all compromising its identity. Of course, no matter how deep it gets, that doesn't overshadow how many of the other episodes are just really creative and funny. There's one where everyone on the island is having a costume party, and Alice, in a bit of short-sighted self-indulgence, casts a spell that turns everyone into their costumes, which leaves Hedgehog as the witch of the island, and Susie as a freaking cheerleader.
Give me an R! Give me an E! Give me a G! R-E-T!
There's that time they see Susie alone on her birthday, so they throw a party for her where they say the opposite of what they think, and after she finds out, she hears this savagery.
Your smile does not look like a haunted jack-o'-lantern face. I don't see a coat draped over a chair when I'm sleeping and think it's you watching me.
Or how about that time Hedgehog goes against Stephen Root in the library?
Card-carrying member of the Iron Bladder Society. I pride myself on going once a day at midnight.
I'll admit, when it comes to episodic shows like this, I tend to pick and choose which episodes to go through based on what premises sound the most interesting to me. But when I first watched this show, I found myself watching nearly every episode. That's how much it drew me in right out the gate. There are of course a few duds in there, but even those have enough interesting ideas and charm to them that I think they were at least worth watching once. Personally, if you'd like to get into the show and want to see the peak of what this special island has to offer, these are the episodes I would recommend. But as you know, this would only be the start of a summer to remember.